HOA tried to fine me $500 for my dock. 72 hours later, I owned their marina. The sirens weren't for me. At least, that's what I told myself as the flashing lights cut through the morning fog rolling over the water. I was ankle deep in the lake, hands steady on a rope of my old aluminum boat, when a squad car crept down Lakeshore Drive. The reflection of its blue strobes fractured across the ripples, splintering the calm I'd guarded for years. Rex, my German shepherd, stiffened at my side, hackles raised. Morning, I muttered to no one, pulling the bow closer to shore. The air smelled of pine needles, wet earth, and the bitter tang of diesel drifting from the cruiser. Sunrise should have been my quiet time, Sarah's time, but instead, my sanctuary braced for invasion. The car door slammed. Heels struck pavement like gunfire. And then came the voice. "Stop right there, Mr. Morrison." Margaret Thornfield, 55 years old, HOA president for barely half a year, already ruling like some iron-fisted monarch in pearls. She strode down my dock in a navy suit that screamed courtroom, not lakeside. Her pearl necklace gleamed against the fog, as though she'd dressed for battle. Behind her, a deputy scrambled to keep pace, notebook in hand, eyes darting between us like a rookie referee at his first boxing match. "You're in violation of community code," she snapped, pointing at my dock as if it were a dead body. "Unauthorized watercraft storage. Unsafe launch activity. Trespassing. Trespassing." My laugh came out harsher than I intended. I tapped the wooden planks beneath me. "This is my dock. My lake. You know that, Margaret." Her lips curved into the faintest smirk, the kind of smile you'd see on a cat before it pounces. "Not according to the revised survey. That water belongs to the community now." The deputy hesitated, shifting on his feet. He wasn't sure whether to cuff me or salute me. I didn't blame him. This wasn't a crime scene. It was a morning ritual. 15 years of dawn fishing trips with Sarah, her thermos of chamomile tea steaming in the cold, her lavender shampoo mingling with the scent of lake water. Since she passed, these trips had been my tether to sanity. My conversations with her lived here, whispered across the water at sunrise, carried by the loon's echo. Losing that dock was like losing her all over again. But Maggie didn't see a grieving husband. She saw an opponent. "Deputy," she said crisply, "document the violation. Mr. Morrison has 30 days to dismantle this structure or face legal action." The man glanced at me, then at the still fogged surface of the lake. His pen didn't move. I stepped closer, water lapping against my boots, voice steady despite the storm rising inside me. "You don't have that power, Margaret. My deed says otherwise." "Your deed," she repeated, rolling the word across her tongue like a joke only she understood. "Paper is cheap. The community's welfare isn't. I suggest you cooperate before this gets unpleasant." For a moment, silence reigned. The mist curled between us, ghostly and heavy, as though Sarah herself hovered nearby, listening. Rex growled low, ears pinned. The deputy shuffled awkwardly, muttering something about checking his notes. Then, as if on cue, neighbors emerged. Porch lights flicked on. Curtains twitched. By the time Maggie spun on her heels, at least a dozen people lined the shoreline. Phones raised, faces illuminated by pale morning glow. And that was the moment I understood. This wasn't about a dock. It wasn't about fishing. It wasn't even about me. It was about power. Who owned it, who abused it, and who had the grit to fight back. I kept my voice calm, but inside my chest, the decision was already made. "Fine, Margaret," I said. "You want a war over this lake? You've got one." Her eyes glittered. For the first time, I saw something dangerous flicker behind them. Not just pettiness, but hunger. The deputy scribbled finally, hesitant strokes against his notepad. The boat rocked gently at my side, patient waiting. And the mist parted enough for sunlight to hit the water, gold and sharp, like the promise of a coming storm. What I didn't know then was that this morning wasn't the beginning of Maggie's war against me. It was the beginning of her downfall. The morning after Maggie's ambush, the lake felt different. For 15 years, it had been my refuge, a place where silence carried more truth than words. But now every ripple looked like a threat, every shadow in the mist like an intruder. Rex padded beside me on the dock, nose twitching at scents only he could read. I envied him. Dogs don't wrestle with property surveys or HOA bylaws. They know what belongs to them by instinct. I tightened the knot on the boat rope and sat at the edge of the dock, coffee steaming in my hand. My wife's favorite mug, chipped at the rim, lavender glaze fading. Sarah's absence was heaviest in these moments. She'd always been the one reminding me not to let little battles grow into wars. "Jake," she used to say, brushing pine needles off her sweater, "sometimes you keep the peace by holding it, not fighting for it." But Margaret Thornfield didn't understand peace. She understood leverage. By mid-morning, the first letter arrived. White envelope, HOA letterhead, a signature that looped with smug authority. Violation notice. $500 fine for unauthorized watercraft structure. Immediate remediation required. I set it down on the kitchen table beside Sarah's framed photograph. Her smile looked amused, as though she could see the absurdity before I could. "Guess we're outlaws now," I muttered. Rex thumped his tail against the floor, loyal as ever. The week that followed became a siege in slow motion. Bright yellow "no trespassing" signs appeared overnight around my shoreline, nailed crooked into trees I'd planted myself. Every morning at 6 sharp, a pickup rolled in and parked nose first toward my dock. Inside sat Derek Kowalski, Maggie's son-in-law, unemployed until recently, now outfitted in a crisp security uniform that still smelled of plastic. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses too big for his face, he'd scribble notes like a mall cop playing FBI. "Morning," I called the first time, robe tied loose, coffee steaming in the cold air. He flinched, mumbled something about compliance checks, and pretended not to notice Rex baring his teeth through the fence. By the third day, Derek's truck was as much a part of the morning landscape as the fog. My neighbors noticed too. Curtains shifted when his engine idled. Kids on bikes gave my driveway a wide berth. The unspoken message was clear: I'd been marked. But Maggie didn't stop at surveillance. Thursday evening, a certified letter landed in my mailbox. Heavy envelope, heavy words. Emergency HOA board meeting. Mandatory attendance. I almost laughed. Mandatory? For who? This wasn't a school detention. It was a power play. Still, I went. You don't ignore an enemy's first invitation to the battlefield. The community center smelled of floor wax and burnt coffee, humming fluorescent lights overhead. Metal folding chairs scraped against linoleum as 40 neighbors shuffled in, faces tight with curiosity and dread. Maggie sat at the front table like a queen presiding over her court. Charcoal suit, pearl necklace, hair sculpted into place. At her side sat Curtis, her lawyer nephew, pale, jittery, forever tugging at his tie. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maggie began, voice slicing through the air, "we are here to address a grave threat to our community." Her finger stabbed in my direction as if pointing at a fugitive. "Mr. Morrison's a legal doc." Murmurs rippled, some sympathetic, others skeptical. I felt the weight of eyes on me. Friends who'd once borrowed my boat ramp, now shifting uneasily in their seats. Curtis unrolled a survey map across the table, lines drawn to make my dock look like an invader. "As you can see," he stammered, "the structure extends 15 feet into common HOA waters." My stomach clenched. I'd seen this tactic before. False maps, doctored lines, all designed to overwhelm through technical jargon. But I wasn't walking in blind. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled from my jacket pocket the document Sarah had insisted we keep in a fireproof safe. The deed, the 2009 survey, the water rights spelled out in black ink. My hands didn't shake. Hers wouldn't have either. According to this, I said, placing the papers on their pristine folding table, the water rights extend 200 feet from my shoreline. My dock is 30, which makes this, I tapped their survey, fantasy. For a moment, silence pressed against the room. Curtis leaned over, face draining pale. Maggie's jaw tightened until her pearls quivered against her throat. Then, salvation in the form of an old voice. "Excuse me." Mrs. Victoria, 78, stood from the back row with quiet dignity. Her cane tapped against the floor as she spoke. "I watched Jake build that dock in 2009. My husband and I used it when ours was under repair. This is no violation. This is history." A wave of nods spread across the room. Others chimed in. Tom Hendricks across the lake. Neighbors who remembered favors, mornings, shared cups of coffee. Maggie's composure cracked, red blotches blooming across her neck. "Personal favors do not establish precedent," she snapped. But the spell had broken. The room wasn't hers anymore. As people filed out, I caught Mrs. Victoria's eye. She gave me a small nod, the kind only warriors give when battle lines are drawn. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by violation notices, fake surveys, and my late wife's photograph. The war Maggie wanted it started, and I was ready to fight it on my terms. The lake had always been my compass. But by the second week of Maggie's siege, I couldn't tell which way was north anymore. Every morning Derek's truck idled by my dock, clipboard propped like a badge of authority. Every evening, another letter slipped under my door. Fines, warnings, threats wrapped in official letterhead. Even Rex seemed unsettled, pacing the house at night as though expecting shadows at the window. It wasn't the noise of war that wore me down. It was the silence. Neighbors I'd known for years suddenly avoiding my eyes, crossing streets, retreating indoors when I walked past. Maggie's poison was spreading, drop by drop. One rainy Tuesday, I almost folded. I sat at the kitchen table, papers scattered around me like fallen leaves. The deed, the surveys, the notices, proof stacked higher than sense. Sarah's photograph rested against a mug ring, her smile steady in a world that wasn't. "What am I doing, Sarah?" I whispered into the hum of the refrigerator. "You tell me to walk away, to let them have their little empire." But the thought of surrendering our dock, our mornings, felt like tearing the last page out of our story. I needed a weapon, something bigger than stubbornness. That's when Dolores Martinez slid the manila folder across the counter at the county recorder's office. "You didn't get this from me," she said, adjusting her glasses. Her voice carried the weary tone of someone who'd seen too many paper wars. "But you want to look closely." Inside, election paperwork. The ink on Maggie's signature was still sharp, but the details were sloppy. The required 30-day notice? Missing. Certified mail receipts? Absent. Half the homeowners hadn't even been informed. I felt a rush of cold clarity. Maggie's throne wasn't built on authority. It was built on sand. Dolores leaned closer, lowering her voice. She cut corners everywhere. "I've been filing HOA documents 30 years. This one's a joke. If it goes to court, her presidency unravels like cheap yarn." I left the office with copies clutched, so tight the edges cut my palms. Rain hammered the windshield as I drove home, my heartbeat sinking with each wiper sweep. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just reacting. I was holding a blade, but the universe wasn't done twisting the knife. That Thursday, as I repaired a loose board on my dock, I saw Maggie striding toward Hendricks Marina, entourage in tow. Curtis with his briefcase, Derek with his damn clipboard. Two strangers trailing like bodyguards. She disappeared into the office. 20 minutes later, she re-emerged clutching a folder against her chest, lips curved in a victorious smile. By dusk, Tommy Kowalski, Derek's cousin, who worked maintenance at the marina, knocked on my door, rain dripping from his ball cap. "Jake," he whispered, eyes darting like a hunted man's. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Maggie offered Bill 50 grand. Wants the marina for HOA members only. Exclusive access. No public launch." The words hit like a sucker punch. If she controlled the marina, she controlled the lake. My dock would become an even bigger target. Neighbors desperate for water access might turn on me, and Maggie's stranglehold would be complete. "Where's the money coming from?" I asked. "HOA emergency fund," Tommy said, voice bitter. She called it a community safety investment. I sank into a chair, hands clasped hard enough to whiten my knuckles. Emergency funds were sacred for floods, fires, true crises, not power plays. Using them for this deal wasn't just immoral. It was illegal. And in that moment, the puzzle clicked together: an invalid election, misappropriation of funds, a plot to monopolize the lake. Maggie wasn't just attacking me. She was trying to rewrite the very DNA of our community. I glanced at Sarah's photo on the mantle. Her eyes held that quiet defiance I'd fallen in love with. She'd always said bullies collapse under the weight of their own arrogance, if someone has the patience to hold the line. That night, I spread the evidence across the kitchen table like a general laying out maps before battle. The deed, the surveys, the election documents, Tommy's whispered testimony. The rain eased outside, but inside the storm gathered focus. Rex curled at my feet, ears twitching as though sensing the shift. I wasn't just defending a dock anymore. I was dismantling a throne. The lake no longer whispered peace. It hissed like a fuse. By dawn, Derek's truck was back, headlights cutting across the fog, clipboard raised like a weapon. He didn't even pretend to hide anymore. Sometimes he filmed me with his phone, muttering into it like a detective on a stakeout. Rex growled until his throat rasped, pacing the shoreline. But Derek was only the messenger. The real poison came through whispers. At the grocery store, conversation stopped when I entered. On the community Facebook page, anonymous posts sprouted like weeds. Concerned about Jake's mental health since his wife passed. Should someone check if he's stable? Another. Isn't it dangerous for one man to control lake access? The words stung more than the fines piling on my table. I could fight paper. I couldn't fight the look in a neighbor's eye when suspicion replaced trust. One evening, I found Mrs. Victoria waiting on my porch. Her cane tapped nervously against the boards. "Jake," she said, voice low, "Margaret's been holding coffee meetings, telling folks you're unstable. That grief's made you reckless." I clenched the railing, the wood groaning beneath my grip. So now I'm the village madman. Her hand touched mine, frail but steady. People forget history too quickly. But some of us remember. Don't let her win, Jake. Sarah wouldn't want you to fade into silence. Her words cut deep because they carried truth. For weeks, I'd fought like a man defending a relic. But maybe this wasn't about clinging to the past. Maybe it was about protecting the future for every neighbor too timid to speak. That night, I drove back to the county recorder's office. Dolores was still there, the last light burning in her window. She greeted me with a weary smile and another stack of files. "Back for more ammunition?" I nodded. "I need the original lake covenant. If Maggie thinks she owns the water, I want to know what the developers promised first." 20 minutes later, dust rose as I opened the binder. The legal language was dry, but one phrase pulsed with electricity: lake access guaranteed in perpetuity to all property owners. My dock wasn't a violation. It was a right. But the bombshell waited further in. Hendrick's Marina lease expired 2 years ago. According to law, the property should have reverted to county control. Maggie wasn't buying exclusive access. She was plotting to pour HOA funds into land that wasn't even legally hers to negotiate. Dolores, I said, throat tight, what happens if no one renews a lease like this? She peered at me over her glasses. Back taxes pile up. Eventually, the county auctions it off. When's the next auction? She flipped her calendar. Friday morning. 3 days. I walked out into the night air, papers pressed to my chest, feeling the shift in the ground. Maggie thought she was cornering me. She just opened the door to her own downfall. But the decision tore at me. Buying the marina would cost nearly everything I had, retirement savings Sarah and I had built over decades. The life we planned together. Was I willing to gamble that future for the chance to stop Maggie? At my kitchen table, I spread the documents beside Sarah's photograph. Her smile caught the lamplight, warm and knowing. I imagined her voice, soft but firm. What good is a future built on surrender? I called Helen Vasquez the next morning, a lawyer known for dismantling corrupt HOAs. Her voice crackled with authority over the line. Jake Morrison, I've heard of you. Show me what you've got. By the time we finished, she was laughing, sharp and delighted. This woman violated so many regulations, I could wallpaper my office with them. But buying that marina? That's not just defense. That's checkmate. Still, the risk gnawed at me. At night, I dreamed of Sarah, standing at the dock, her hand brushing the water, her face fading into mist. Each time I reached for her, she drifted further away. Thursday evening, my neighbors gathered in my living room. Mrs. Victoria brought cookies. Tom Hendricks leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes fierce. One by one, they placed their deeds, photos, and testimonies on my table. The stack grew like a fortress. You're not alone, Jake, Tom said. She wants the lake. She'll have to take it from all of us. I looked around the room, at faces weathered by years, at kids sprawled on the floor, playing with wrecks, at a community rediscovering its spine. For the first time, I didn't feel like a widower fighting ghosts. I felt like a man standing at the edge of a storm with an army at his back. Friday morning loomed like thunder. By then, I would either lose everything or own the one thing Maggie thought would make her untouchable. The courthouse smelled of coffee and floor wax, a mix of bureaucracy and inevitability. At exactly 10 a.m., Commissioner Wells read the first item on the docket. Hendricks Marina. Assessed value, $180,000. Back taxes owed, $12,347. Her eyes scanned the room. Opening bid. I raised my hand, certified check burning a hole in my jacket pocket. Yes, ma'am. Silence. The elderly man in the corner kept reading his newspaper. A woman scrolled on her phone. No one else moved. Going once. Going twice. Wells' gavel cracked like lightning. Sold to Mr. Morrison. And just like that, the lake shifted beneath my feet. By noon, word had spread. Maggie stormed into the marina in a scarlet blazer, Curtis trailing behind like a man being dragged to his own trial. Derek loitered with his clipboard, trying to look official. This sale is fraudulent. Maggie's heels clattered across the dock. You can't just buy community property. I met her glare without blinking. It wasn't community property. It was county property. Now it's mine. Curtis tugged at his tie, murmuring, Aunt Maggie, maybe we should silence, she hissed. Her eyes burned into me. You think this little stunt gives you power? I'll bury you in injunctions. Good luck, I said evenly. Your election was never valid. Your emergency fund raid? Illegal. And now your leverage over this lake just evaporated. For the first time, her expression cracked. Just for a second. Then the fury returned. You're finished, Morrison. You'll regret this. But her threats sounded brittle, like glass ready to break. 3 nights later, she tried her final gambit. The community center was packed beyond capacity, folding chairs scraping air thick with burnt coffee and sweat. Maggie had called it an emergency safety meeting. I knew it was her last chance to turn the crowd. She rose behind her folding table, pearls gleaming like armor. "Neighbors," she began, voice steady, "we face a grave threat. One man has seized control of our lake, manipulating documents, intimidating residents, hoarding access for his own gain." Murmurs rippled. Some nodded, others frowned. Then she pulled out her weapon, a phone. She pressed play. My voice echoed through the speakers, chopped into jagged fragments. "You'll lose everything. I'll control the lake. You'll regret crossing me." Gasps. Phones lifted. Eyes swung toward me like blades. Maggie paused the recording, savoring the silence. "There is your proof." "Extortion." I stood slowly, heart steady. "Play the rest." "What?" "Play the unedited recording." Her eyes narrowed. "That's all that matters." I pulled my own phone from my jacket. I recorded the same conversation. The room hushed as my version filled the space. No threats, no extortion, just her proposal, my calm refusals, her voice trembling when she realized I wasn't buying her compromise. The cuts in her version were obvious now, ugly scars across the truth. Laughter broke from the back row. Not cruel, incredulous. Someone muttered, "She faked it." Another, "Unbelievable." I laid more papers on the table. The original covenant guaranteeing lake access in perpetuity, her flawed election documents, the misuse of emergency funds. Each sheet landed like a hammer. And finally, I said, my voice cutting through the rising noise, the marina deed. As of last Friday, it belongs to me. Not Maggie, not the HOA, me. And I intend to honor the covenant. Access for all, not just for those she approves. The room erupted. Shouts, claps, even a cheer. Mrs. Victoria rose, cane tapping like a gavel. That's the truth. We've all seen it with our own eyes. Enough of her lies. Maggie's face went pale, then blotched red. She tried to shout over the noise. "He's lying. He's manipulating you." But the words drowned in the tide. That's when Commissioner Wells stepped forward, sheriff's deputy at her side. "Margaret Thornfield," Wells said, voice ringing like judgment. "You are hereby ordered to cease interference with county property and HOA funds. Misuse of association resources is under investigation." The deputy set papers on the table. Legal weight heavier than any pearl necklace. Maggie looked around the room, for allies, for sympathy, for escape. But all she found were phones raised, neighbors shaking their heads, Curtis quietly gathering his briefcase and edging toward the exit. For the first time, she was alone. Her voice cracked. This is a conspiracy." "No," I said softly, so only the front rows could hear. "This is justice." The lake was quiet again. Not the brutal silence of suspicion, but the kind that carried laughter across the water and made the loons sing louder at dawn. It had been 3 weeks since Maggie's collapse at the community meeting. She'd resigned by email, blaming toxic conspiracies and ungrateful neighbors. Derek moved 2 towns over to sell security systems door to door. Curtis slunk back to his law office, filing contracts instead of lawsuits. Their empire crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. What remained was ours to rebuild. I walked the marina docks one Saturday morning, Rex padding beside me, his nose twitching at the scent of bait buckets and sunscreen. Families clustered near the water, kids tugging on fishing rods too long for their arms. The air buzzed with questions. Do fish sleep? Why are worms slimy? Can dogs fish too? "Welcome to the Sarah Morrison program," I said, voice carrying across the crowd. The words still tighten my throat, but in a good way now. Every Saturday, we handed out rods, reels, and stories. Kids learned how to tie knots, cast lines, and, more importantly, how to wait, to listen, to respect the rhythm of the water. Mrs. Victoria told them about the lake's early days, showing photographs of when the shoreline was nothing but raw earth and promise. Tom Hendricks demonstrated boat's safety with the patience of a man who'd seen too many reckless weekends. And Rex? He became the unofficial mascot. Children leaned against him when their lines tangled, their laughter shaking his fur as he endured it all with saintly calm. Watching them, I felt Sarah everywhere. In the scent of lavender and neighbor war, in the way the morning sun broke through mist the same way it had on those quiet coffee dawns with her. She would have loved this, not the fight, not the war, but the healing. The HOA board, rebuilt through a proper election, turned transparent for the first time in years. Fines dropped by 70%. Budgets were published in plain language, not hidden behind jargon. Neighbors who'd avoided each other now shared grills and folding chairs at evening barbecues. "You saved us, Jake," Tom said one night as we watched the sunset bleed across the water. I shook my head. "No, Sarah saved us. She told me to hold on to peace, even if it meant fighting for it." He didn't argue, just clinked his beer bottle against mine and let the silence speak. But victory didn't taste like revenge. It tasted like apple pie cooling on Mrs. Victoria's windowsill, like coffee shared on porches where curtains used to twitch shut. It tasted like children squealing when they caught their first bluegill. Some evenings, I still sat alone on the dock with Rex, line cast into still water. I talked to Sarah, telling her about the kids, the neighbors, the way the lake had healed. Sometimes I swore the water answered, in ripples, in bird calls, in the sudden tug of a fish on the line. The grief hadn't gone. It never would, but had changed shape. No longer a weight dragging me under. It became the current that carried me forward. On the first anniversary of the program, we placed a small bronze plaque on the dock for Sarah Morrison, who believed peace was worth protecting and mornings were meant to be shared. Neighbors gathered in the golden dusk, their reflections shimmering on the lake's surface. The children read the plaque aloud, their voices unsteady but clear. And for a heartbeat, I felt her hand slip into mine, warm, steady, familiar. The lake breathed again, and so did I. Sometimes I think back to that morning when Maggie marched down my dock with a deputy at her heels. I remember the fear, the anger, the disbelief of being called a trespasser on my own water. Now, I see it differently. That was the morning Sarah's voice returned, not in words, but in the fire that refused to let me surrender. And if the lake has taught me anything, it's this: peace isn't given. It's built. It's defended. It's shared. The water reflects the sky again. Not because Maggie lost, but because a community remembered what it means to win together. I cast my line into the fading light, the ripples spreading outward. Somewhere in the distance, a loon called, and the sound felt like an answer.